Joining us today is Dustin O'Quinn, GSBA board member, member of the GSBA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, and chair of Immigration Practice Team at Lane Powell. Today, Dustin will cover updates around employment immigration issues affecting Washington employers, such as presidential proclamations banning certain work visas and green card applications, the impact COVID-19 has on employers and employees in the state, and the recent Supreme Court decision on deferred action of childhood arrivals, also known as DACA. Our format allows you to engage professionals with questions in the wake of COVID-19. Now, let's go ahead and welcome our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dustin.
Thanks, Joey. I'm happy to be here.
We know that you have joined us before as a previous host of Rapid Response, but I'd like to go ahead and invite you to take a moment and reintroduce yourself, acknowledge the work that you do for GSBA, and then let us know a little bit more about immigration attorney at Lane Powell.
Thanks. I'm Dustin O'Quinn. I am a board member of the GSBA, and I'm also on the board's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And so we are looking forward to making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is in the DNA of all activities of the board and the chamber. I'm also on the board of the local American Red Cross and the Q Law Association, which is Washington State's LGBTQ plus lawyer and legal professional association. I'm very excited about my work with the GSBA. I think GSBA does some really fantastic things, and I'm really happy that in addition to really focusing on trans issues in the last few years, that we're now starting to focus on other diversity, equity, inclusion issues in the LGBT community and the business community at large, including issues focusing on people of color. I am an immigration lawyer. I've been practicing employment-based immigration with a little family and removal over 15 years now. I am fluent in Spanish. I started my practice in Texas. I moved to the Seattle area to work for the fantastic law firm of Lane Powell just over 4 years ago. I'm the chair of Lane Powell's Immigration Committee. I'm also on the law firm's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And immigration has been very interesting in the last few years. I mean, it's really been interesting forever. And then since 9/11, and then since our current administration started on January 1st. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you and the GSBA members who are attending about immigration.
Well, as a staff member of GSBA, I'm thankful for your presence on our board and the work that you do for our members. And of course, joining us again today for Rapid Response. So let's go ahead and jump right into our Rapid Response Q&A. According to the official White House website, the United States must adopt an immigration system that serves the national interest. To restore the rule of law and secure our border, President Trump is committed to constructing a border wall and ensuring the swift removal of unlawful entrants. To protect American workers, the president supports ending chain migration, limiting visa lottery, and moving the country to a merit-based entry system. These reforms will advance the safety and prosperity of all Americans while helping new citizens assimilate and flourish. You sort of just touched base a little bit in your intro, but Dustin, after nearly 4 years of this messaging from our current administration, how has your reaction to this stance on immigration policy been affected?
I would say, Joey, that's a great question. And that stance, that policy was a mouthful. And so I think what I've done is I've educated myself even more. And those of you listening might say, well, you're an immigration lawyer, you know a lot about what's going on out there. And I try to, but also just as a person, as a citizen of the United States, because while there are some policies that are purely legal or just factual or based on numbers, there are others that do seem to sneak into the realm of political a little bit more, right? And we'll talk about legal immigration later, but illegal immigration is a really touchy topic. It's a very personal topic. And so I've educated myself a bit more. And what I found is that we cannot discuss immigration in sound bites. And so, of course, no one, I can't speak for everyone. I'm not going to say that I support illegal immigration, and I'm not going to say that I support, everyone sneaking across the border. Certainly, dangerous criminals. We've had a lot of history in certain parts of the country. But what I can say is that the United States has always and currently has understandings in the forms of treaties and conventions with countries all over the world. And we all have this sort of reciprocal process where we understand the need for asylum and refugees. We also understand the need to have to welcome different people with open arms. So it's not a very clear, again, it's not a soundbite, clear situation, So when I say that I support us opening our borders to people who have valid claims of asylum and who need our help and need protection in the form of refugee status, that is where I've landed. And when I married that idea with the legal aspect of, we have very clear rules about what it takes to become asylum seekers and persons seeking refuge in the United States. We have very clear rules about what it takes to come to the United States to temporarily or permanently live with family members or to get a job here. What I've seen in the last few years is the current administration attack both legal and illegal immigration in ways that are incredibly inconsistent with the very foundation of this country, of how this country was founded. And so when we start to rock the boat with regard to refugee applications, asylum applications, with how we interact with our allies, I take issue with how we're going to ever recover and how our businesses, our families, our citizens are going to operate inside the realm of legal immigration when it's being turned upside down on its head versus either legal or illegal immigration. Don't know if that made sense, but again, it's a very difficult process. And so when I hear words like chain immigration, for example, I want to dive in deeper and explain to people that, for example, there's no such thing as an anchor baby. An illegal person can't come to the United States, have a baby, and then become a citizen. A United States child who is born here can apply for their parent to become a citizen once that child is 21 years old. However, if you have more than 6 months of unlawful presence in the United States, you're going to have a very hard time becoming a green card in the United States. So again, if you come here and have a baby and you wait 21 years for that baby to apply for citizenship for you, that's not easy. So this concept of anchor baby is just one thing that's not going to work. When I hear about the wall, for example, that's something else that's not going to work. There's so much data out there that shows that we have visitors to this country or people coming to seek refuge and asylum for very, very, very valid reasons. There's also a lot of data that shows that there are tons of people who enter illegally, and many of them do not enter at the official border crossing. So building this multi-billion-dollar wall will not necessarily end illegal entry into the United States, but providing a valid, fair, reasonable way for certain people to come to the United States to get legal if they meet all of the qualifications and pay taxes will actually help the United States. I don't like the fact that our current administration has spent an insane amount of money on enforcement issues when those enforcement issues aren't as effective as some other issues. And what I mean by that is, our previous president, President Obama, was called the deporter in chief. More illegal immigrants, particularly dangerous criminals, were deported under President Obama than under any other president. And I think the way that we were able to do that is by focusing our resources and attention on illegal, dangerous illegal immigrants and not children, for example, or not those who simply want to support the United States and pay taxes.
There definitely is a complexity to it, and much more than just, reading a paragraph that is posted on, the White House, website, even the information there, I had to delve in personally myself to look up some of this information and see the direction that they were moving forward with. And you're even bringing up Obama as well. Historically, just in the recent history, what has been happening, with immigration. And I guess I personally take from the initial conversation paragraph I read that there's a bit more of a system that's being looked at towards privilege and a little less towards a humanitarian feeling.
That's what they say. That's correct. When they talk about a merit-based system, because the majority of my practice is employment-based immigration, I tend to think that we already have a similar system in place. There are so many requirements for the different types of employment-based visas, or typically called work visas, and you have to have certain degrees or certain amount of experiences. Some of them are only for people from certain countries. I certainly understand that. If you listen to the business community, whether we're talking about small businesses, mid-sized businesses, or even Fortune 100 companies, they will tell you that there is already a shortage of workers in the United States, even with the number of visa applications that we're filing every year. You can look to the commonly used H-1B visa for professional workers, jobs that typically require bachelor's degrees. That visa is used by and large by the tech industry, but by many others as well. There are only 85,000 new visas in that category available every year, but the government gets over 200,000 applications for those visas. So I think that shows that there's a bigger need. In the past, there were 300,000 applications or more. So, it's weird that the White House has this rhetoric about moving to a merit-based system when we already have a system that is really strict depending on your field and the degrees that you're in, but yet the business community shows a dire need for more people, not fewer people. So I'm nervous about the White House's stance on making immigration even stricter.
Speaking of the White House, President Trump has acted to temporarily pause immigration and protect American workers as we confront coronavirus. Dustin, can you speak on the presidential proclamation that has set on blocking legal immigration?
Sure. That's I think the reason that that first paragraph we talked about was so complex, because I find a lot of the White House messaging, particularly the messaging on Twitter, to be not effectively written. And so that proclamation that you just mentioned came out first in the form of a tweet, and it really sent the immigrant community and the allied immigrant community scared. We were scared for a while until the proclamation came out. It said that it was going to end all immigration in light of coronavirus. Instead, what that proclamation did was it actually temporarily stopped green card applicants who are currently outside the United States from getting green cards to come into the United States. So that proclamation had a much smaller effect, or a much smaller impact, than the tweet that announced the proclamation said it would. It did not stop all immigration. It didn't even stop green card applicants who are already in the United States from applying for a green card. Only people who are currently outside the United States, who are in the green card process, that process was stopped for 60 days. It was extended through December 31st of this year. And so I want to make sure that anybody's listening, if you are here on a student visa or a work visa, or if you're here on a family-based immigration visa, and you are applying for a green card, that application can still move forward in light of that proclamation. One other thing I want to mention, Joey, is that you're correct. When that proclamation came out, it said that it was doing so in light of coronavirus. There is high unemployment in coronavirus. This pandemic has been devastating to our economy. Unfortunately, just factually, stopping people who are outside of the United States from temporarily getting green cards and coming in would not have a huge impact on the unemployment rate here. Usually if someone's getting an employment-based green card in the United States, that job is already waiting on them perhaps. But if you look at the industries, there's just such a weak tie between the unemployment rate and people who are coming here to get green cards. And so I think, or at least it's my opinion, that the unemployment rate as a result of the coronavirus was really an excuse for the president to kind of start chipping away at legal immigration because there's not a direct tie there.
Since we are, addressing, the coronavirus, the White House did state that COVID-19 has significantly disrupted, American livelihoods. Since March, U.S. businesses and their workers have faced extensive disruptions while undertaking certain public health measures necessary to flatten the curve of COVID-19. And the overall unemployment rate in the United States nearly quadrupled between February and May, producing some of the most extreme unemployment ever recorded by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So you've kind of begun the conversation here. Could you get a little bit more, around COVID-19 and the effects on employment immigration?
Sure, I knew you were going to ask that question, which is why I stopped the first time, because the president actually did release a second proclamation about 6 weeks after the first one. I just said that the link between green card holders outside the United States and employment didn't have a big impact. So the president signed another proclamation that said we are going to take a look at limiting some work visas as well. And so factually, again, in the world of sound bites, that does seem to make a little bit more sense. So the work visa applications that were affected were the H-2B, which is called a guest worker program. So it's people who come to the United States to work temporarily for a season. I think of people who work in resorts or at water parks, for example. The J-1 visa, which is often called the intern visa or the trainee visa. Sometimes it's called the au pair visa. And that is usually for someone to come to the United States, again, temporarily for less than a year, usually to get training. And then two widely used visas in the world of employment immigration are the L1, intra-company transferee, and the H-1B that I mentioned earlier, which is the professional worker visa, the one that requires people to have a bachelor's degree. So these two visas were widely used by companies, particularly if you think about companies here in the Pacific Northwest and the kind of industries that we have here in the Puget Sound region. The H-1B professional worker and the L1 are widely used. If you've got an office in Canada and an office in the United States, and you want to bring an employee who's been working with you for a few years in Canada, who has a specialized knowledge of your products, you want to bring them to the United States. That visa was designed to help United States companies stay sharp and competitive in the global marketplace. Well, the president released a proclamation that said, until the end of this year, until December 31st, 2020, we're not going to let new people into the United States in those categories. Now, if you already have a visa, like an actual visa in your passport that allows you to come into the United States, then you're fine. Also, if you're already here in one of those categories, it's not that we're going to deport you, it's just that we're not going to open the Department of State and give new visas for people to come in those categories. And on first glance, Joey, I think, if we're concerned about the economy here, and we are, we would think, well, that makes sense, right? I've actually been to the White House and had a White House representative say, oh, the number of people who are unemployed is the exact same number of people here on visas. And again, that soundbite sounds right, but it's so much deeper than that and so much more complex. So I'd like to take a minute to address what you just said. The unemployment numbers in the US are staggering right now. And that is so sad. It's so horrifying. But what's interesting is that the computer jobs and the tech industry, which is by far the largest user of the H-1B visas, their unemployment is actually down. For the months of March, April, and May, the numbers were down than they were in December, January, and February. And some would say it's because those jobs already, by and large, work from home, or they can work from home. But also those industries may not have been affected by some of the lingering impacts of COVID-19. So I think it's really interesting that we said, because of COVID and because unemployment is so high, we're gonna limit these visas, but those are not the people mostly who are losing their jobs. In fact, what we're doing is we're actually hurting the United States economy more by limiting those visas, because the companies still need those jobs. In fact, many software engineers work on companies that are ramping up their activities. As more people are ordering online and doing things on their computer, you might need more computer engineers for those tech companies. So when we limit the number of workers that United States companies can hire, we are actually hurting the economy, we're hurting the consumers, but also there's significant data that shows that for every company that hires a foreign worker on an H-1B visa, there's an average of almost 2 jobs that go to United States workers. What we have seen in the last few years, Joey, is as immigration has gotten harder and harder, just like with this proclamation, more US companies are shutting down. If they can't get that one foreign worker and they shut down and move to a different country, that affects 2 United States workers who also now don't have a job to work at that company. So this, in this time of high unemployment, is not the time to shut down visas that are widely being used by companies who are ramping up their operations. If they're ramping up their operations and they needed an H-1B visa, they can also hire US workers, and that helps everybody. So I don't want to belabor that point, but that's just one example of how when you really study and delve into the issues of what's going on, you'll see that these Band-Aids, these apparent fixes that the White House is making to immigration to help unemployment is not actually helping unemployment in the US at all. It's actually hurting US businesses and companies that are already hurting because of COVID-19.
Looking towards larger solutions, the more the long game and sustainability with our jobs and with these businesses. Let's go ahead and toss it over to Terea with the next question.
Thanks, Joey. Last month, the Supreme Court rejected the Trump administration's attempt to dismantle the programming protecting undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as children, a reprieve for nearly 650,000 recipients. Dustin, can you go more into depth about Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, known as DACA, and the path you see moving forward for these dreamers?
Sure, Terea, thank you. Yeah, we should be clear about a couple of things. Like, the DACA was a program that was started by President Obama. And it was the reason that DACA recipients are called dreamers is because there have been acts floating around Congress that have never been passed by both houses, unfortunately, that are referred to as the DREAM Act. And so it's really clear that the DREAM Act, or DACA, is for people who were brought to the US illegally as children. In other words, it's really not, it wasn't their decision to come to the US. You have to be under the age of 16 when you came to the US. You have to be a high school graduate or in the military or honorably discharged from the military. You can have no more than a couple of misdemeanors, no felonies. So we're really talking about taking good kids and giving them work authorization. And I also want to be clear that it is not giving them citizenship. It's not giving them any lawful status, actually. They are still considered illegal. Deferred action for childhood arrivals means we recognize that you're illegal, but we're going to defer our action of doing anything about it. In other words, we're not going to deport you yet. We're going to recognize that you're here, and we're going to give you work authorization so that you can get a driver's license and that you can work and you can pay taxes while we decide what we're going to do. And sure, when that program came out, I think nobody intended, we're going to deport you eventually, but we will let you work while we're doing it. Maybe they will deport them eventually. But this is not a path to citizenship. It is not an easy grant of asylum or just handing out a green card. There were about 650,000. It's estimated maybe a little bit more people who qualified for this deferred action for childhood arrivals. And it was great. There is data out there that shows that over $1 billion in taxes could be paid from these DACA recipients who are able to contribute to the US economy in a legal and valid way, and in a way that they want to. Well, the current president, Trump, has never liked the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and he has made it clear that he wanted to end this program. In fact, last year, he said that new DACA recipients could not apply. So that kind of put a small stop to the program, but certainly people who had already applied for the last few years could get renewals, or every 2 years they renew their DACA and they renew their work authorization. Well, the president tried to put a stop to DACA, and it was challenged, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And just last week, the Supreme Court said the president can't put a stop to DACA in the way that he attempted to do so. In short, basically, the president just sort of haphazardly said he was going to end the program. What's really interesting and also pretty scary about the president's power over DACA is just as easily as President Obama said, the DREAM Act isn't working, so we're just gonna make this a program, President Trump can end the program. He simply didn't do so appropriately. He didn't cross all of his T's and dot his I's, and that's what the Supreme Court said. They said, sure, you have the power to end this program, but you didn't do it in the right way. What's really important about that Supreme Court decision is that now President Trump does not have the time to appropriately end DACA. So that's good. That means that DACA is going to go into effect past the election and through January. If President Trump gets elected again this November and has a second term in the White House, it is thought that he will end DACA the right way. So that's something that's really making DACA supporters quite nervous. But we are taking the small victory right now in that new DACA applicants can apply, and that people who have DACA can get their renewals, that people can sort of come out of the shadows when they were brought here as children. They're graduating college and they're not stuck. They can actually get a job, get work authorization, get a driver's license, pay their taxes, and contribute.
So after November with potential President Biden, what do you see as the happening down the road in the positive side of things?
Sure. So if President Biden is elected, we certainly believe that the DACA program will continue. We think that we're going to see a lot of positive changes in immigration. I can't say that I think the DREAM Act is going to pass. Again, it's been floating around Congress for more than 20 years, and that really depends on the makeup of Congress. But the good news is that we see absolutely no stop to the DACA program if Biden is elected and becomes president. And so that's good news. Not only that, but what's not in the news, what we see as immigration practitioners, those of us who are practicing immigration every day, is that from just a practical level, immigration has become really hard. So it's not really about the policies or the laws, but the immigration agents who are sitting at the different service centers approving applications are making it really difficult for people to get approvals. They're taking longer, they're scrutinizing applications much stronger than the law says they should be scrutinized. So we really hope that if we get a new president, that Biden will continue this program and speed things up and just make it easier for those who are eligible for DACA to get it and to be contributing members of society.
Dustin, with coronavirus continuing to spread rapidly in the United States, and at least 33 countries have barred entry to American travelers because of this, do you see any correlation or ramifications associated with the future of immigration?
I do, Joey, and frankly, I saw this before coronavirus. I mentioned at the very beginning of the call that we have treaties and conventions about immigration, something that's not widely known, but immigration policies worldwide are a little bit reciprocal. There's kind of a certain type of visa type that a lot of countries have when they open their doors to other countries. As the US has just gotten progressively more difficult and progressively strict, unreasonably so in the last few years, we've seen other countries start to follow suit and start to make it harder for United States travelers to visit those countries. They've started to make it harder for United States workers to get guest worker visas to go to those countries for short-term or long-term jobs. And then you add to that coronavirus, and you add the fact that people are really, countries are taking it as an important job to protect their citizens. And when you look at how we are arguably not doing enough to protect our citizens in the United States, people are closing their borders. And we saw this trend towards nationalism in the last few years. I don't think that coronavirus is helping that. And so when you mix the fact that United States we have such high numbers for COVID-19, and then you mix the fact that we have been apparently really unwelcoming to people from a lot of other countries over the last few years, and then take that we're taking steps to end our relationship with the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement. It's like countries are saying, why would we open our doors to the United States? So I do think that we're going to see an issue with not only people coming to the US to visit, but there will be a backlash, perhaps not as strong, of US people being able to travel to other countries.
Let's go ahead and toss over to Terea. Terea, do we have a question that came in?
Yes, I'm curious, Dustin, if you can touch on the difference and similarities between seeking immigration status and the need to seek asylum.
Sure. So there are a few ways to enter the United States via legal immigration. There's employment-based visas, family visas, a visitor visa, often called a tourist visa, and then there's asylum. The short answer is really that, if you're seeking an employment-based visa, that means that you're coming to the US to work for a US company. And it's pretty much that simple. It's not that simple to apply for, but it's that simple. A family-based visa means that you're being sponsored by a family member, either a US citizen spouse, a parent, in some cases, brothers and sisters who are citizens, maybe some family members who are lawful permanent residents, but not citizens. So that's family-based visa. The family and employment visas have application processes where you are being sponsored by either a US company or a family member. Asylum is different. Asylum is based on you have incredible fear of being persecuted or killed in your home country. And so you are literally seeking the protection of the United States government. And so that process is very different. There's usually something called a credible fear interview when you enter the United States, where they take some notes and they see what exactly are you fleeing from. Is it a gang? Is it persecution because of your LGBTQ status or because of your religion or your race? That's what asylum is. So they're very different processes. Asylum has always been a little bit difficult to get because the government wants to make sure that you're not just anybody coming over here without a sponsor and saying, yeah, I'm gay, and so I'm from this country that hates gays. It's not that simple. It's always been hard. Unfortunately, in the last few years, asylum applications have become so much harder that people who have very valid claims to asylum are not able to seek asylum in the United States, or they're seeking it, but it's not granted. And so we have seen people be sent back to their home countries and actually become the victim of the fear that they had. In other cases, people just go into the shadows and they stay in the United States illegally, and then they live in fear here. They're still fearful of whatever group or person in their home country that said that they were going to hurt them, but they're also fearful that they're going to be kicked out of the United States. They can't work legally, they can't pay taxes, and they might get deported back to their home country.
You sort of ventured into what my follow-up question would have been to this, is definitely, speaking on of fleeing due to fears. And the last few years, the need for LGBTQ community members to flee their home countries to seek asylum definitely had been increasing. We know that those who are most marginalized, will be disproportionately impacted by not only the pandemic, but because of their status of being a part of the LGBTQ community. So, have you had any involvement or connections with individuals seeking refuge or trying to immigrate, but now they find that our borders are closed?
So I would say I haven't worked in any asylum cases in the last few months since COVID-19, but there are reports that that fear of persecution is so strong, Joey, that people are certainly willing to risk their lives with regard to the pandemic. Sometimes they travel with family members, and those families still want to come to the United States because at least they're not being told that they're going to be put to death in the countries where they are. I mentioned that the standard was so strong, but so was the fear. I mean, just this weekend, I read an article about, I don't remember which country it is now, but that declared certain zones of the country LGBTQ free zones, where they're basically just saying, we don't support the gay mission here, we don't support gays here. And so we see this all over the United States, particularly with regard to the nationalism that we talked about earlier. Everyone sort of strengthening their borders and kind of going back to this idea of things were better the way that they were. I take that to mean that they were better when people of color didn't have rights and when LGBTQ people didn't have rights. And again, in so many of these countries, they still don't. So there are reports that even in light of travel being more difficult, of our border being more secure or more strict, that people are still coming here because the fear in their own countries is so great. And in many countries, it's actually worse now. When governments and when large amounts of people or the masses are afraid, as we all are right now because of the pandemic, people tend to group together and really start to other people. And so just like we're seeing a little bit of divide with some hope in our own country, we're seeing these divides in other countries, and we're seeing people start to other people, to push out LGBTQ citizens, to push out citizens of color, and really start to band together. It's really sad. I'm glad that we have the asylum process in place, but the president has tried to also stop asylum applications temporarily. And so we're glad that there are lots of groups, companies, and nonprofit organizations out there who are suing the administration. And we are seeing things move through the courts really quickly so that smart decisions are being made in light of the pandemic.
Dustin, we really appreciate your time with us today. Just wanted to open up the conversation. Anything additional that we may have not touched base on that you want to make sure that the messaging gets out to our viewers and GSBA members?
Sure, there's yet another, there's so many immigration updates right now, but there's another one that's kind of related to what we just ended on. The president said a couple of weeks ago through ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that any person in the United States on a student visa, affecting mostly universities, who would be attending all of their classes online, 100% of their classes online, would no longer be eligible for their student visa. In fact, it wasn't just like we won't renew it for the next semester, but it's like you will be unlawful and deported for being on a student visa. Well, of course, because of the pandemic, so many universities are moving to partially or completely online classes. And so we were really afraid for about a week and a half of how the thousands and thousands of students in the United States who are here, who've been here for a long time, who are giving their tuition money to these US institutions, who may have a hard time getting back into their own countries right now, what's gonna happen to them and their status and their families when they are suddenly illegal? Fortunately, a group of universities, including MIT and Harvard, sued the administration instantly and got an injunction, or they didn't get an injunction, sorry, the administration just pulled back. It was almost like they said, we know that this was such a ridiculous policy. We don't want to go through the process of a lawsuit, that we're just gonna pull back this. We're not going to deport people, and we're not gonna invalidate the status of students who are attending classes 100% online. So that's kind of where I went. That's my glimmer of hope when I talk about asylum cases, when I talk about the ability for LGBTQ people and other people who might have fallen victim to come to the United States. When I talk about companies and their need to get work visas for people in the United States and family members, I think that some of the policies now are so unreasonable that we're seeing a pendulum swing just a little bit, and we're seeing groups take legal action to fight those policies. And it works sometimes, just like in DACA that we discussed a few moments ago, or like in the student visa. But we are going to have to keep fighting because this administration is not relenting when it comes to attacking legal immigration just as much as it's attacking illegal immigration.
Well, I definitely know that we are happy that you're there for the good fights and, you know, keeping things moving forward, and let's get that, you know, pendulum swinging back in the right direction that it needs to go to. So, you know, on behalf of GSBA, I'd like to go ahead and thank everybody for joining us today. Very special thank you to you, Dustin, you know, for sharing your insight on immigration issues that are impacting us today. When you all log off from our rapid response, do be sure to fill out the GSBA survey that's presented to you both on Facebook and Zoom. This will help us with our future GSBA rapid response programming. Our next GSBA rapid response, it will be on Tuesday, August the 4th at 10 a.m. During this episode, hospitality and tourism community members from across the Pacific Northwest will talk about creative measures they're taking to help people get outside and remain safe, and what the future of the industry looks like, you know, with social distancing as that continues. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.